Most people live as if they are expendable pieces, on a chessboard pawns waiting to be sacrificed. They tell themselves to be humble, to fit in, to tone it down. And in doing so, they betray their birthright, the ability to stand like a general, to command presence, to act as if they are the most important figure in the room. Here is the ruthless truth no motivational speaker dares say. The world does not reward talent. The world does not reward morality. The world rewards perception. If you act as if you are the best, unyielding, unshakable, untouchable, then others will bend to that perception. If, however, you doubt yourself for a single moment, understand this: the wolves will smell blood, and they will devour you. Think about it. How many people do you know who are objectively less skilled, less intelligent, less hardworking, yet they are above you, leading, commanding, being obeyed? Why? Because they mastered the psychology of appearing inevitable. They acted as if they were already kings before they had a crown. I learned this bitterly in my early 20s. I walked into every room quieter than I should have been, waiting for permission to speak, waiting for acknowledgement. And without fail, I was invisible. In one business meeting, I remember sitting across from a man twice my age, twice my arrogance, and half my intelligence. He thumped his hand on the table, spoke as if every word was decree, and though he was wrong on half the facts, the deal went to him. Why? Because the others assumed that someone so certain must know something they didn't. My silence wasn't seen as humility. It was seen as weakness. That night, I realized, power doesn't flow to the deserving. Power flows to the audacious. History whispers the same lesson. Julius Caesar, before becoming the man who dissolved the Roman Republic and crowned himself dictator for life, acted like a king even when he was broke and irrelevant. He wore purple when only high officials could. He borrowed money on a scale no young man should dare borrow. Everyone thought he was insane until his sheer certainty began reshaping the reality around him. Soon, the Senate bent not because he had earned it, but because he had projected inevitability long enough that Rome began to believe him. This is the Machiavellian principle the weak refuse to embrace. You do not wait to be declared the best. You declare it yourself. You embody it in every glance, every gesture, every silence that demands attention. If you wait to be recognized, you are already defeated. And conventional wisdom will resist me here. You've been trained since childhood. Don't be arrogant. Don't think too highly of yourself. Let others decide your worth. That messaging was not designed to free you, it was designed to tame you. Sheep must be humble so they can be herded. Lions cannot. Kings cannot. Conquerors cannot. So let me ask you directly, are you playing as a sheep or as a lion? Do you defer, waiting for some invisible council to crown you? Or do you step into the world as if the crown belongs to you already? Most people never cross that line. They tell themselves, when I've proven myself, then I'll carry myself like the best. But Machiavelli knew it's the reverse. Appear the best, act the best, and only then will power consolidate around you. Imagine the consequences of not taking this to heart. How many more years will you spend being overlooked? How many positions of power will pass to lesser men because they dared to appear greater? Can you stomach the knowledge that your hesitation, not your lack of ability, was the reason you were bypassed? As we speak, someone less qualified than you is positioning themselves as the inevitable choice. They are practicing bold certainty. They are conquering with facade while you're still sharpening your substance. The time is now. You must learn to act as if no one is better than you. It is not arrogance. It is survival. And here's the dark beauty. Once you act as if you already are the best, resistance begins to crumble. Others cannot fight what already feels like destiny. Napoleon once said that in war, morale is worth more than numbers, and this is your morale weapon. Project domination so persuasively that others no longer question your authority. The real question is, are you willing to abandon your conditioning, to kill the slave in your mind, and to embrace the ruthless psychology of power that the world's greatest conquerors embraced? Or will you keep living on crumbs, pretending humility will someday be rewarded? In the next part, I'll strip away the mask fully. I'll show you not just the theory, but my own scars, the humiliations that forced me to rebuild myself from nothing, using this exact philosophy to climb from anonymity to command. So I'll ask you now, are you ready to confront the most uncomfortable question of your life? What if the only thing Holding you back is the way you carry yourself into every battle. Powerful truths always cut with sharp edges. And this one carved me open before I ever dared to wield it myself. For years, I lived in the shadows of men who were less capable, less disciplined, less intelligent, and yet they stood in the spotlight while I lingered backstage. The brutal lesson? Competence without audacity is the graveyard of potential. I remember the day it all collapsed for me. I was 23. I had just joined a business venture with 3 partners. I was the one who knew the market best, the one who had sleepless nights crafting strategies, the one doing the heavy lifting. But when we walked into investor meetings, I would sit quietly, waiting for the appropriate moment to speak. My partners, louder, less informed, full of chest-pounding bravado, presented half-baked ideas with absolute conviction. Investors never looked at me. Their eyes stayed locked on the men, who spoke as though every word was destiny written in stone. At the time, I told myself, they're faking it. Eventually, truth will reveal itself. But truth never came. Money flowed to them, respect bent toward them. And me? I became the invisible one, the nameless builder behind the curtain. When one investor later asked me if I was just an assistant, I tasted humiliation so sharp it seared my throat. That night, staring in the bathroom mirror, I realized something devastating. It wasn't the world holding me down. It was the way I carried myself. And this isn't just theory, it touched deeper parts of my life. In relationships, in friendships, I noticed the pattern repeat itself like a curse. At university, I admired a woman from afar, certain my quiet depth would eventually draw her in. Instead, she fell for the loudest, brashest guy around, barely literate in comparison to me, but loud enough to convince her he was the sun around which everyone revolved. That was the second time I watched an inferior man win. Not because he was better, but because he acted better. This broke me before it rebuilt me. For months, I thought the answer was to wait my turn. I thought the meritocracy would eventually pay me my due. But meritocracy is a fairy tale. And fairy tales are the weapons of rulers who want the ruled to stay quiet. It was only when I stumbled onto the writings of Machiavelli, during a lonely winter, that everything clicked. Here was a man, centuries ago, who laid bare the savage truth. People do not follow those who are right. They follow those who are perceived as strong. Weakness, whether real or simply projected, was punished with obscurity and betrayal. In his treatise, The Prince, Machiavelli argued that it is better to be feared than loved when one cannot be both. At 23, that line felt like an electric sting. I realized I'd been wrong. The transformation didn't come instantly. I wrestled with it. I feared I'd become arrogant. I feared people would hate me if I carried myself with dominance. But then I thought, hadn't they already discarded me anyway? Hadn't my humility cost me friends, love, respect, and money? What worse outcome could come from taking the opposite stance? And so I tested it. The next investor meeting, I didn't sit back. I entered the room first. Saturday, at the head of the table, spoke before anyone else. Was I nervous? My heart pounded like war drums. But I forced my tone into certainty, my words into command. To my surprise, the dynamic shifted instantly. My partners deferred to me without realizing it. The investors questioned them, but they nodded at me. For the first time, power tilted toward me. That moment was my rebirth, not because I had suddenly become more intelligent, but because I finally understood the battlefield of perception. History validates this. Consider Winston Churchill in 1940. Britain was broken, on the verge of surrendering to the Nazi war machine. Objectively, Britain was weaker, vulnerable, nearly finished. But Churchill stood in Parliament, not with numbers and proofs of certain victory, but by projecting an unbreakable will. His certainty was contagious. While other men despaired, Churchill declared Britain's defiance with such force that reality bent toward his words. He acted as if defeat was unthinkable, and through this audacity, his nation found morale to fight. My story is smaller, but the principle is the same. When I acted invisible, the world ignored me. When I acted inevitable, the world shifted in my direction. Now I turn the focus back to you. Ask yourself honestly, how many times in your life have you lost not because the opponent was stronger, but because they played the role better? How many times have you walked quietly while someone else stole the ground under your feet simply by acting louder, bolder, heavier? And ask this even deeper question. What if your greatest humiliation wasn't a verdict on your ability, but a verdict on your posture? The first scar that taught me this truth burned deeply. But without that humiliation, I would still be a silent shadow today. Pain was the price of awakening. As we move forward, I want you to remember this. It is not enough to be good, or even great. You must act as if you are best. This belief precedes evidence, and the world bends to those who carry that belief with relentless audacity. Next, we'll step into the battlefield of history itself. I'll show you how emperors, warlords, and visionaries used this principle ruthlessly, not as theory, but as strategy. And once you see their campaigns through this lens, you will never again mistake humility for virtue in power. Power does not emerge from fairness. Power does not flow from merit. Power, in every century, bends toward those who acted as if they were born to command. Look closely at the stories history feeds us. The rise of Caesar, the conquests of Alexander, the imperium of Napoleon. What unites them is not simply their strategic brilliance, but their refusal to operate as equals among men. They carried themselves as if destiny flowed through their veins, and because they believed it, others followed. This is not philosophy in the abstract, it is the architecture of history itself. And Machiavelli, writing in Florence in 1513, dared to codify it. He stripped away illusions of morality, exposing the gears of power in their cold, ruthless truth. A prince is obeyed not because he is just, but because he appears inevitable. Let's examine Caesar first. Before he was the dictator perpetuo of Rome, he was simply a young aristocrat drowning in debt. Rome was crowded with senators wealthier, older, better positioned. But Caesar cultivated an aura of inevitability and command. He dressed lavishly when he was broke, borrowed sums so large they terrified his creditors, and walked among the common people as if he were already their champion. His strategy? Project greatness until reality surrendered. In 49 BCE, when he crossed the Rubicon with a single legion, senators who should have crushed him panicked. Why? Because Caesar, even unsupported, had already written himself into the story of Rome's future. The man who acted like destiny soon held destiny itself. Alexander the Great carried this principle to divine heights. Before leading his men into Asia, he declared himself the son of Zeus Ammon, a blend of Macedonian and Egyptian godhead. Was it true? Of course not. But truth was irrelevant. By acting as if a god favored him, he gave his soldiers belief, and belief transforms armies into empires. With just 40,000 Macedonians, he dismantled the Persian Empire, a power with forces 10 times larger. His edge was not only military genius, but psychological supremacy. Alexander's very posture screamed inevitability, and in war, morale is often stronger than swords. Napoleon Bonaparte provides the most modern echo. Rising from an obscure Corsican family, he carried himself not as a provincial outsider, but as Europe's rightful master. At the 1796 Italian campaign, Napoleon addressed his ragged French troops like they were lions before battle, promising plunder, glory, empire. He gazed upon Italy's wealthy provinces and declared them already theirs. His soldiers, starved and unpaid, marched as if the world belonged to them, and within weeks, they annihilated forces that were better supplied, entrenched, supported. Napoleon projected inevitability until Europe itself believed it. Machiavelli, observing such patterns, concluded that leaders must manipulate appearances relentlessly. To show weakness is fatal. To show doubt is suicide. Appear strong, even when you are not. Appear merciful, even when you are cruel. Appear inevitable, until no one dares contest you. This doctrine is not positivity, it is strategic warfare, survival itself. You see, conventional wisdom insists on earning recognition before projecting confidence, but history ridicules that submission. Churchill had no proof Britain could withstand Hitler's assault in 1940, yet he spoke as though defeat was impossible. That posture alone gave his people the fire to fight. If he had spoken with hesitation, history might have buried Britain alongside Poland and France. Even Sun Tzu, centuries before Machiavelli, wrote in The Art of War, appear at points which the enemy must hasten. To defend, march swiftly to places where you are not expected. The principle is the same. Domination flows first from perception, then from physical fact. If the enemy believes you unstoppable, their resistance weakens before swords even clash. And now, here is where the knife cuts deepest. Most of the powerless live by the inverse principle. They wait for confirmation before acting as strong. They demand validation before carrying themselves with dominance. And for that reason, they never ascend. They die pawns, whispering excuses while lions roar above them. Let me demand something of you. In how many areas of your life have you acted like a beggar instead of a ruler? In your workplace, do you wait for someone to nod before you contribute? In relationships, do you linger on silent hope rather than carrying yourself as one worthy of pursuit? And in your own mind, do you kneel before fear, waiting for courage to visit you like a ghost? This is where Machiavelli's philosophy sears like fire. You must invert the paradigm. Project greatness before you are great. Act as if no one surpasses you because the appearance itself will forge reality. Think of it like an empire. Fortresses are not built on shifts of sand, but on declarations carved into stone. If you wait to be crowned, the crown will never touch your head. If you seize it through posture, presence, audacity, the world will reshape its story around you. In the coming section, I will arm you with evidence-based methods, scientific validation from psychology, social dynamics, and behavioral science that prove why this principle works not just historically, but biologically. Once you see the mechanisms, you will never again underestimate the sheer power of acting as if you are already the best. Power without proof is not a myth. It is a mechanism encoded into human psychology. What Caesar, Alexander, and Napoleon practiced intuitively, modern science has dissected into pieces. Today, I'll show you that acting as if you are the best is not delusion. It is a neurobiological strategy supported by hard evidence. Here's the contrarian truth. Success does not create confidence. Confidence creates success. You don't wait until you win to carry yourself like a winner. You win precisely because you carried yourself that way first. Let's begin with a simple observation from social psychology. In 1981, researchers Rosenthal and Jacobson tested what is now called the Pygmalion effect. The phenomenon showed higher expectations lead to better performance. Teachers were told that certain random students in their classrooms were intellectual bloomers. These labels were false, but within months, those very students began performing drastically better. Why? Because expectation creates perception, and perception reshapes reality. When others treat you like you're extraordinary, you rise into their perception. But here's the hack Machiavelli would whisper. Instead of waiting for someone else to bestow that perception, you generate it yourself. You become your own crown. Go deeper. In 2010, Dana Carney and Amy Cuddy at Harvard Business School studied what they called power posing. Their research showed that standing tall, opening your chest, spreading your frame postures that signal confidence didn't just change how others saw you. They changed hormonal levels inside the body. Testosterone, the dominance hormone, rose. Cortisol, the stress hormone, fell. In essence, acting powerful for even 2 minutes began rewiring the body to become powerful. Pretending to be the best can make you stronger. Think about the battlefield implications of this. History's greatest leaders instinctively used their posture, tone, and certainty to create physical effects in their followers. But the science shows it begins even before others observe you. It begins in your own bloodstream. Your biology bows to your posture. Here's another validation. Organizational psychology has long studied what's called the self-fulfilling prophecy effect. In 1998, researchers Eden and Shani ran controlled military studies with Israel Defense Forces officers and cadets. Those cadets, who were randomly labeled as having combat leadership potential, performed significantly better throughout training despite no objective difference in ability. What did this prove? Belief, external or internal?